The sound came first. Slow, measured footsteps echoing along a polished corridor, growing louder with every second. Classrooms seemed to shrink when that sound appeared. Chalk paused mid-stroke, whispers vanished. And even the clocks felt quieter. You didn't need a name to know who it was. Every pupil knew instinctively, sitting a little straighter, eyes forward, breath held. Back then, a school could fall silent without a word being spoken. Today, corridors buzz with noise and movement, but then, one presence could still a building. And as those footsteps passed your door, a question lingered. Why did they hold power? To understand that silence, you have to remember the Britain it came from. The years after the war were shaped by rebuilding, routine, and a deep belief in order. Authority was trusted, rarely questioned, and often admired. At home, at work, and especially at school, clear lines were drawn and firmly held. Schools were busy places, packed with children from growing families, guided by rules that felt carved in stone. Uniforms were checked, manners were expected, and expectations were rarely explained because everyone already knew them. The headmaster stood at the top of this quiet pyramid, not simply as a teacher, but as a guardian of standards and behavior. For parents, that authority offered reassurance. For children, it created certainty, even when it felt intimidating. Back then, challenging a decision wasn't part of the conversation. Respect flowed one way, reinforced by tradition, routine, and silence. Today, we encourage questions and openness. But in those classrooms, structure mattered more than comfort. And within that structure, the headmaster's role grew larger than life. It was a world where adults led, children followed, and rules quietly shaped daily life. Setting the stage for the atmosphere remembered so vividly today by generations across Britain, the headmaster's office felt like another world. Heavy doors, a large wooden desk, and walls lined with framed certificates that spoke of tradition and achievement. Many pupils never crossed that threshold, yet everyone knew what lay beyond it. The chair behind the desk was usually occupied by a calm, unsmiling figure who spoke slowly, choosing words with care. There was no need for raised voices. Silence did the work. Back then, mystery was powerful. You rarely saw the headmaster in corridors or playgrounds, but their presence was felt everywhere. Teachers mentioned the name with quiet emphasis, and that was enough. For most children, the headmaster existed more as an idea than a person, shaped by assembly speeches and whispered warnings. Today, school leaders are visible, approachable, often first-name familiar. But in those years, distance created authority. Ritual replaced conversation, and that quiet separation made the figure behind the desk feel larger than life, shaping behavior without ever needing to appear, and it lingered in memory long after childhood ended completely. Every school day followed a familiar rhythm. Morning assembly in the hall, lines kept straight, shoes aligned, voices lowered. Posture mattered, uniforms were checked, and small details carried quiet importance. No one needed reminding twice. A single raised eyebrow from a teacher or a hushed mention of the head could still an entire room instantly. What mattered most wasn't what happened, but what might. Anticipation filled the gaps, teaching children to read atmosphere and behave accordingly. Silence became a language of its own, heavier than any explanation. You learned when to speak, when to stop, and when to disappear into stillness. Today, rules are written on posters and discussed openly, but then they were absorbed without words. Discipline lived in the air, not the rule book. It shaped habits, confidence, and caution, often without anyone realizing how. And within those quiet rituals, children learned lessons that stretched far beyond the classroom, carrying that sense of order with them into adulthood, ready for whatever authority might come next in later adult life. Looking back now, it's clear that the influence of those schools reached far beyond the classroom. The formality, the quiet pressure to behave, and the constant awareness of authority shaped how many children saw themselves. Some learned discipline, focus, and respect for structure. Others learned to stay unnoticed, to keep opinions tucked away, and to measure words carefully. That atmosphere followed pupils into adulthood. In offices, workshops, and meeting rooms, echoes of school life lingered in posture, tone, and deference. For some, it became resilience, an ability to cope with expectations and rules. For others, it left a hesitation, a sense of holding back. The truth is, it was never one story. Each child experienced it differently, depending on temperament, support, and circumstance. What united them was the memory. Even decades later, many can still feel that tightening in the chest when authority entered the room. A reminder of how deeply those early lessons settled within them all for life. What people remember most isn't just the rules, but how they felt inside them. For some, that structure offered safety. Clear boundaries meant knowing where you stood, what was expected, and how to succeed. In a changing post-war world, that certainty could feel reassuring. Others remember something heavier: the pressure to conform, the fear of standing out, the feeling that mistakes lingered longer than lessons. There's no judgment here, only understanding. Back then, respect was often rooted in distance and quiet fear. Today, it's more likely built through conversation, visibility, and mutual trust. Both approaches carry strengths and weaknesses. Structure can steady, but it can also stifle. Freedom can empower, but it can drift. What matters is recognizing how deeply those systems shaped us. They influenced how we respond to authority, how we listen, and how we lead. And in remembering both the comfort and the weight, we begin to see. Today, school leaders walk corridors alongside pupils, chatting, smiling, known by name. Doors are open, conversations encouraged, and authority wears a friendlier face. The old mystery has faded. Footsteps no longer freeze classrooms or silence a building mid-breath. Something has changed, undeniably. Perhaps something softened. Perhaps something strengthened. As we look back, the question isn't whether the past was better or worse. It's whether those moments shaped us in ways we still carry. Was something important lost along the way, or was it simply outgrown, as Britain itself learned to speak differently to its children? For more of these unbelievable memories, tap the video on your screen. The 1970s stories are something else. Don't forget to subscribe.